Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Let's Have Renaissance, a podcast about writing, editing, publishing, literature, the arts, and more. I am Ito Otini.
And I'm Micaiah Otini, and today we're speaking with Susan Kelly-DeWitt. Susan is an award-winning poet and visual artist. She's published with independent presses across the U.S. and in prestigious journals including Poetry, Prairie Schooner, and the North American Review. She's also edited journals in print and online, and she's a member of the National Book Critics Circle. We're excited to be with her today.
Thank you for tuning in. We're excited that you're here. Why don't you also subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with your friends?
And if you know anyone who wants to come on the podcast, please do send them our way. Also, if you haven't yet, sign up for our newsletter where we share updates, resources, and opportunities at thedatekeepers.com.
Susan, thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to have you. Can you please tell us about yourself?
Well, I grew up in Hawaii. I was born in San Francisco, but I went to the islands when I was about 1 year old. My mother was born and raised in the islands. My great-grandparents came around from the Azores, came around Cape Horn in the late 19th century and settled on the Big Island, Hawaii. That's where my mother grew up. But before the war, they moved to Oahu. So they were there for the war. So it was like growing up in a post-war country. We lived in a cottage that was once part of an artist's colony. And the artists, Lily Gay Torrey and William Burroughs Torrey, both well-known artists in those days, had built their mansion in Kalihi on the island of Oahu. There's a waterfall there and a Kalihi stream and a tropical rainforest all around it. And they built a gallery where they had an artist salon. And artists would come up from Honolulu and come to the salon and they would all meet. And when we lived there, I was very little. I was like from age 2 to age 6. Lily Gay Torrey was still alive. The gallery was still full of paintings by both of them. And so I spent my early years watching her paint, and then just, being in a tropical rainforest like that has a lot to do with both my visual art and my poetry, I think.
You mentioned that there weren't many other kids around. I relate. I had a similar childhood in that respect. How would you say that's shaped you in your artistic practice?
So I'm 5 years older than my brother. So I was alone a lot of the time and outside. So if you look at my work, you'll see that plants and insects and creatures and landscape, natural history plays a large part in especially my writing and also in my visual art. I think that's because I had more relationships with insects, birds, and plants than I did with other children. I would see my cousins, of course, sometimes because my mom's family lived there, but it's definitely a big influence on my work. And also seeing all those paintings in the gallery where I lived. So the visual is an important thing in my writing, just observation and looking at details and so forth. It's just part of who I became.
When you're working through a thought or a feeling or an impression, how do you choose whether to give it shape in the form of text or image, or do you often work through things in both text and image and pair them together?
Earlier in my career, my life as an artist, I tried to combine visual art and poetry. And I still have a few of those pieces, but I've kept them very separate. My life as a visual artist has been very separate for the most part from my life as a writer.
How do you decide which project is going to take a visual form versus written?
I feel like I'm a writer more than I'm a visual artist. I do the visual art, but I haven't done it as much in the last few years. I see the visual art as sort of an aside to my writing somehow.
How did you find that out about yourself?
I'm not sure exactly. When we were in Hawaii, my father was good friends with somebody named Don Blanding, who was a very famous poet in those days. And he would come to our house sometimes. So I had poetry, even though I didn't really know what that was at that stage in my young life, but that was sort of embedded in my growing up. And I read a lot as a kid, so Edgar Allan Poe was a big influence when I was a kid. And then when I got to high school, one of my teachers was a poet. And when I was doing poets in the schools, I loved to tell the kids this story that when I was in high school, I wrote a very long poem. I had read A Tale of Two Cities, and I wrote a very long poem about someone going to the guillotine, and it was rhymed, and very formal verse. And the last lines were, "So spoke my head from its place unseen, where I left it near the guillotine." And they would just all laugh like crazy, So I wrote that poem, but then I didn't really do very much else for a long time. When I was growing up, most of the poets were men, so I really didn't. Despite my getting a little bit of encouragement as a teenager and as I got a little older, I really didn't start thinking that I could write poetry until I was in my 20s. And Sylvia Plath's poetry was a big influence on me. When I read Plath, I thought, whoa, if she can write about this stuff, so can I. At this point, I was at California State University, Sacramento. My teachers there were wonderful, and they supported me. Dennis Schmitz, who is my just beloved mentor for many years, and just some of the other faculty there. And then I started meeting poets. But it was really I would say I was in my mid-20s before I actually started thinking of myself in that way. And over the years, I've gotten messages from people who read a poem that really helped them in some way. And I never would have known that with just a single painting or something, or ceramic work. I feel like writing is more my job in life.
What kind of messages have you received, and what kind of connections were you able to make in that way?
Well, not connections so much as I remember once a long time ago, I received a little note from somebody who in those days was a high school student who had read one of the poems about my childhood. And she thanked me for writing it and that it really had helped her. She hadn't felt like she could talk about that before. And then, I get emails and notes from people just saying that they really were moved by a poem, and they don't necessarily say what that meant in their lives, but just things like that. I do remember one time, a long time ago, when I was first writing, and I published something in a local poetry newsletter. And somebody wrote me from Kansas. They had found the newsletter on a train, and they read the poem, and they were so moved by it. And that was probably 45 years ago. That was just so amazing to me that happened. So things like that, as I always say to my students, when you write something, it goes out into the world and you never know who's going to read it. People all over the world see your poems. I've had people in the UK pick up my poems. Somebody in Italy picked them up recently. Just a little while ago, I heard from somebody in Maine who wanted to use a poem of mine in their newsletter. And I want to think that somebody might read my poems 50 or 100 years from now and still make a connection and have it mean something to them.
That's great to hear. I'm glad that a lot of people all over the world are reading your poetry. We always ask our guests to read. Do you have anything you would like to share with us, whether a poem or a couple of poems?
Yeah, I actually do. I was going to read first from my book, Gravitational Tug, that came out from Main Street Rag Publishing 6 years ago now. I spent a lot of time with Neruda. Neruda was one of many big influences on me. So this poem is called Poem Built Entirely of Questions and Couplets, after Neruda. Who wrote the expository essay of the sky? If the sun is our instructor, what grade will it give us? Who is the dean of the galaxies? Who are the regents of black light? And what is our moon revising with its white reflective pen? Is it composing a love poem or a lament? How many desert islands in the mind at 7 minutes until death? If we pry open the mouth of night, will we find 2 rows of uneven teeth? Isn't that what the old religions meant by the devourer? Who will the dolphins vote for on election day? How will the sharks cast their ballots? Will the grains of sand along the shore stand up to be counted. The same old sly barracudas fix the results once again. What is that tunnel of white light the fresh from the dead claim to have seen? How many watts is it at peak load? And when it burns out, who will replace the bulb? Who booked our passage to the graveyard? Is it true there is a border wall and we'll be lost there without a passport? So that's one I wanted to read. Here's one from the title poem from my book, Gatherer's Alphabet, and it's an Abecedarian. Gatherer's Alphabet. Archive day, night, spring, summer, autumn, winter. Be an apothecary of wonder. Arrange an arsenal of antidotes called art. Admire avocets and arachnids. Bottle up buddies, beauty, and even brambles. Bravos to Buddha, to butterflies, and to brash Baudelaire bouquets. Collect coriander, carpenter bees, carnivals, and carp. Consort with the condemned. Dive into the country of being. Dive in unafraid. Elope with crow on the coldest morning of your life. Fish with the ghosts of salmon, drag the river for their sisters' bones. Get greedy, get down on your knees, greet the grass with a kiss. Haul hope in, big truckloads of it, build big hills of it in your backyard, hoard it along with any hugs. Invent a tool for digging up one fat root to anchor you. June is the time to gather jars of jasmine and jewelweed. Keep your kitchen stocked with keepsakes, kestrels, curiers, kisses, and kites. Lip the shine from snail trails, trout scales. Add lusty to your lexicon. Listen, lap gold from Limoges. Make a gatherer's list, make a map, then abandon it. You are only a mist. Notebooks are good for the illusion of containing. N is for nihilist equals nil. Oleanders, orchestras, orchids, and Omar Khayyam under the O's. Pack your parlor with plethora, parakeets, poetry, and plum jam. Quietly become the queen of quantum. Round up the red diamonds of sunset, the repertory of river reeds. Sorrow has its own saloons filled with soldiers and suicides. Tease the shadows out of hiding, tally the dead, but also the truth of the living. Utter the name of each thing at least once. Understand the word as umbilicus. Verbs, vines, veins, verisimilitude, and venom should appear in your variorum. Whole-souled, wholeheartedly grab the world. Whoop it up. Weep. X out the Xeroxed ink blot you think stains your soul. Yoke yourself to yellow, to the life-giving yarrow. Yearn, yop, yowl. Zoom the zones of the ineffable. Life zips by. Leave your mark like Zorro. Maybe I'll just read one more, short one, from my book Spider Season. Interrogative, and it's in 3 parts. 1. From what catalog did we order the housefly's designer clothes? What if at the end of the butterfly's wing there is an anti-butterfly? Who developed the grief chemical that poisoned our ozone? If there is a God, does it wear perfume? 2. When will the skulls in their bone uniforms hand us our walking papers? How many bandages will it take before the bleeding stops? Is it true what they say, that there is really only one bandage? 3. What if the rose is the temple and the bee is the prophet? And I think stop there.
Thank you so much for reading. We really enjoyed it, and we enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah, thank you, Susan.
Yeah, thank you so much. Take care, you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.